Good afternoon, eighth grade. As I said, we're going to put up this here YouTube video on Reconstruction, and as the word says, Reconstruction is just kind of like the rebuilding of the country after the Civil War. Now, I not really don't think there was too much rebuilding going on in the North because the whole war was fought in the South. So Reconstruction means rebuilding the country. Now we know that Abraham Lincoln is no longer with us in this time because he was assassinated by Booth, and his vice president Andrew Jackson is the man who is in charge of Reconstruction. Uh, in 1865, Congress established the Freedmen's Bureau, which was to give rights to the black man, and it started before the war was actually over. It was about 2 months before Lee surrenders to Ulysses Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, which was the official ending of the war. The Freedmen's Bureau was also known as the Bureau of Refugees, um, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. And what it was is Congress was going to help millions of former black slaves and poor whites in the South after the Civil War. The Freedmen's Bureau provided food and housing and medical aid, established schools, and offered legal assistance. It also attempted to settle former slaves on land that was taken during the war. However, the Bureau was prevented from fully carrying out these programs due to the lack of money and personnel, along with the politics of race and Reconstruction. So, even though the Emancipation Proclamation freed all the slaves, it really hasn't changed much except they were free. When Congress introduced the bill in February of 66 to kind of extend the Bureau's tenure of the Freedmen, uh, Johnson vetoed it, the proposed legislation, on the grounds that it gave no legal powers, too much legal power. It interfered with states' rights. It gave preference to one group of citizens over another and would impose a huge financial burden. So, right away, you've got Jackson fighting against all the ideals of Abraham Lincoln. In July of the same year, Congress overrode the president's veto and passed a revised version of this bill. Remember, you can over president vetoes a bill, it goes back down to the House and they vote on it, the Senate votes on it, and then if it gets a 66% chance or 66 majority, it goes through regardless of what the president says. So it did. Johnson then becomes embroiled in a fight with the radical Republicans that are in Congress. It was the radical Republicans who were pushing forward with the whole ideals of the Freedmen's Code. So he fights with them, and he believed that their views were too lenient, and because of this fight with the radical Republicans, the Freedmen's Bureau suffered as a result. Johnson's actions, which included pardoning many former Confederates and restoring their land, uh, as well as removing these Bureau employees he thought were too sympathetic to the blacks, served to undermine the whole idea of the Freedom Bureau. So, as you can see, John Jackson is already fighting Congress on every angle he can to get rid of this whole Freedmen's Bureau. Now, this isn't to say that the Freedom Bureau didn't make some kind of progress, particularly in the realm of education, um, because it did. It brought about um, a lot more education and literacy for the freed slaves and the African Americans. Although it failed to do the main thing, which was to grant them land, um, leaving a lot of landowners, white landowners, to support their families. This became sharecropping, and sharecropping was that they would give them a piece of land, they would work the land, they would keep what they could, give the rest to the owners. Um, it became this brutal cycle of poverty for the African Americans as well as the real poor white people. The freedmen's court system was a little bit more effective because they did have a court system which provided African Americans with legal um, counsel. So it was able to do good in that regards. Now, under Reconstruction, there were several plans. Of course, there was Andrew Jackson's plan called the Presidential Reconstruction, and Jackson's plan required Confederate states to ratify the 13th Amendment. If you remember the 13th Amendment, that was a call for the abolishment of slavery and create a new government with new constitutions before they could rejoin the Union. Johnson also pardoned, legally forgave most Confederates who took an oath of loyalty to the Union. The pardons restored the civil rights and protected the property from being seized by anybody in the Union. At the end of 65, Johnson announces his plans for Reconstruction, and it reflected both his staunch unionism and his firm belief in states' rights. His view on the southern states had never given up their right to govern themselves, and the federal government had no right to determine voting requirements or other questions at the state level. Under Johnson's presidential reconstruction, all land that had been confiscated by the Union Army and distributed to the freed slaves by the Army reverted back to the original owners. So the African American, once again, does not get any of that land that was given to them by the Union. Other than to uphold abolition of slavery, that's about all that the South had to do, and maybe swear loyalty to the Union. Because of Johnson's leniency, many Southern states enacted a series of what they call black codes. These were designed to restrict freed blacks' activities and ensure the availability as a labor force. So they put these black codes on to the black people after they had been slaves, and the codes enraged the North even further, including numerous members of Congress which refused to seat congressmen and senators that were elected from southern states. So you've got a big cluster problem inside of Congress, and it's not getting any better. What else? After Johnson vetoes all the bills that have to do with civil rights, um, he really kind of ruptures his relationship with Congress because of this. And in 1868, the Civil Rights Act becomes the first major bill to become law over a president veto. Okay. Furthermore, that wasn't the first Civil Rights Act. In 1866, there was the Civil Rights Act that gave full equality and citizenship to every race and color. Of course, Johnson vetoes this bill, but Republicans in Congress overrode that veto, and the bill became law. To solidify everything, radical Republicans also came up with the 14th Amendment, and then under Johnson, urging many states refused to ratify the new amendment. It took 2 years for 2/3 of the states to ratify this. After Northern voters rejected Johnson's policies in all of his elections, Johnson's vetoes, Congress then passes the Reconstruction Act of 1867. This divided the South into 5 military districts and outlined how government based on universal suffrage were to be organized. We're talking about male suffrage here, too, not the suffrage as we know in the women's fight for equal rights. The law also required Southern states to ratify the 14th Amendment, which broadened the definition of who a citizen was, granting equal protection of the Constitution to a former slave before they could rejoin the Union. In 69, Congress approved the 15th Amendment, which guaranteed that a citizen's rights to vote would not be denied on account of race, color, or condition of servitude. condition of servitude, slavery. And by 1870, all the former Confederate states had been admitted to the Union, and the state constitutions during the years of radical Reconstruction were the most progressive in the region's history. The participation of African Americans in Southern public life became far more radical development of Reconstruction, was essentially a large scale experiment in interracial democracy. So, as you can see, Andrew Johnson, not a very good president. But again, we've had some very not good presidents in the future. So, anyway, that's a beautiful talk about Reconstruction. Uh, very simple. Hope you have a good day. Look for your reading, and you will have a quiz coming up. Remember, I have office hours tomorrow morning at 9:30, Mondays and Thursdays. Be good to see you there. Or don't complain about not being able to do your work. Make sure you visit the thing. If you're going down the 10 freeway towards New Mexico, it'll be on your right side. The thing is well worth your stop. Have a great day.